The King's Avatar, Chapter 1354. Decided by Details. Audio source, WurshaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1354. Decided by Details. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Seeing Luoji's careful arrangement, the Void fans were on the verge of collapse. What kind of people were these happy players? What the hell was all this? This was an official match, you know. What were you taking it as, carrot fantasy or Plants vs. Zombies or something? Seeing the summon creatures scattered across the map, it didn't seem like glory anymore, but some sort of tower defense game. However, Luoji didn't seem to notice at all. Concealed light poked a hole in the wall of the straw hut and looked out through the hole. The Void fans in the stadium were restless. They had an omniscient view, so they were even more clear on Blue Exorcist's movements than Luoji. Blue Exorcist really was approaching in this direction. Seeing his progress, it wouldn't be long before he entered the formation Luoji had set. Though everyone looked upon this tower defense-like setup with contempt, but it also seemed very powerful. GEKG wouldn't lose to this rookie, would he? The Void fans began to worry. After Li Xuan had lost the first match, they were disappointed, like they had just lost 10 points. Their focus had subconsciously shifted as the match began, and they began to worry that GEKG might walk into a trap. He's close. On the big screen, it was showing Concealed Light's view from where he was looking through the hole. GEKG's Blue Exorcist strolled right into view, looking completely unsuspecting. The audience felt their heart in knots, many of them yelling, but none of it could be heard by the players in the booths. However, GEKG seemed to realize that it wasn't logical that he still hadn't seen hide nor hair of Concealed Light from this position. Blue Exorcist slowed his movement speed slightly. Step by step, carefully now. However, Luoji was very patient. Although his heart was already jumping into his throat, he held himself still. He believed that this was his only chance for victory. He had to grasp it. His fingers were a little stiff from nerves, but his mechanics couldn't go wrong. From Luoji's view, everyone had realized what he was doing. Under the default settings, summon creatures would attack anyone who came within their aggro range. However, a summoner could command their summons to defend. That way, they would only attack those that came within attack range or those that attacked them first. They wouldn't initiate combat or pursue targets. However, that wasn't all that Luoji was doing with his summons. He was suppressing even the attacks that would be released when a target came within attack range. There was no setting for this, so if one wished to accomplish it, they could only continuously order their summons to defend. This was, of course, to make sure that his target was as deeply positioned within the formation as possible before attacking. However, if you wanted to suppress these attacks, you had to repeat actions at a certain rhythm. This sort of thing, for pro players, wasn't anything hard, but Luoji was nervous. His fingers were stiff, and he wasn't all that practiced at this sort of repetitive mechanics. It didn't feel like his fingers were actually his. By this time, Blue Exorcist had already gotten rather deep into range and the audience was cursing up a storm, but Luoji didn't think it was enough. His opponent hadn't gotten to prime position yet. However, he really couldn't continue with this repetitive actions that pro players shouldn't find very hard. His stiff fingers broke rhythm. Swoosh. The ones to attack first was the Devil World Flower, hiding behind a tree. A vine creeped out of the ground and curled towards Blue Exorcist's leg. Luoji, seeing this, knew that he was at his limit and couldn't help but be overwhelmed by disappointment. But, at a time like this, he might as well hurry and attack. With Devil World Flower launching the assault, Young Wyvern and Thunder Eagle on the rooftops to the left and right also flew into the sky automatically. One spat a fireball down and the other spat a thunderbolt. Spirit Cat was a melee summon creature, so after telling it to defend, it wouldn't move. Luoji immediately cancelled his defend order and then had Concealed Light begin casting to summon Frostwolf. Ice Wolf was relatively large in size and didn't have an appropriate hiding place in this area, so Luoji had Concealed Light summon directly outside of the straw hut. Devil World Flower's attack had come far too suddenly, and by the time GKG noticed, hurriedly having his aqua jump to dodge, it was too late. The vine whipped up, grabbing the limb it had caught and sending Blue Exorcist crashing back to the ground. He couldn't move. That was the side effect that the vine attack came with. Devil World Flower was extremely annoying because it had such an effect. Boom boom. A fireball from one side and a thunderbolt from the other crashed down. Blue Exorcist, unable to move, could only twist his body to dodge. However, he couldn't dodge them completely like this, and immediately, flames and electricity scorched his body. Whirlwind. GKG was very decisive as well, knowing that it wasn't the time to save up his skills. Blue Exorcist brandished his battle scythe, whirling it around and around. The vines of Devil World Flowers were like individual characters, having their own HP gauge. Once you used attacks to deplete its health, it would immediately break. Blue Exorcist ate another fireball and thunderbolt, but regained his movement, immediately lunging into a charge. He had already figured out the position of Devil World Flower. This summons had the strongest CC. GKG could tell that Blue Exorcist was too deep in his opponent's formation. Trying to escape Devil World Flowers wasn't the best choice at a time like this. Killing it first would be the best option. Swoosh. Another spike stabbed up from the ground. Devil World Flowers' attacks were considered very troublesome precisely because of how concealed they were. However, GKG's Blue Exorcist was already leaping up to dodge it. He was extremely calm, and even when surrounded like this, he could still make clear judgments on when Devil World Flower would attack. WooshOurWorldAudio.com. The airborne Blue Exorcist already had a third of the Devil World Flower in view. His scythe raised and about to strike when suddenly, with a howl and a breath of cold, Frostwolf lunged from the side and tackling him to the ground. Concealed Light had also followed Frostwolf out of the straw hut. Even though it was safer to hide inside the straw hut, his vision was limited and therefore would be limited in his control over his summon creatures. For example, if Concealed Light had been in the straw hut for Frostwolf's lunge, then he could only depend on the system automated attacks, and it probably wouldn't have been timed so well. Summons on auto were rather dumb, knowing only to attack and attack and attack. They wouldn't synchronize their actions and work with allies, and definitely wouldn't time their attacks. Thus, Concealed Light showed himself, and Luoji would use this field of vision to carefully control his summons and make sure Blue Exorcist didn't get another chance to escape. Blue Exorcist, tackled to the ground and torn it by Frostwolf, had been slowed. With two explosions, the airborne Young Wyvern and Thunder Eagle once again spat out their fireball and thunderbolt. Spirit Cat had already arrived as well. It was only by Luoji's orders that it had yet to attack, leaving the tackle to Frostwolf. Now, with the situation under control, Spirit Cat was free to come up and make its DPS contributions. Blue Exorcist rolled on the ground, dodging the attacks from the four beasts, occasionally jumping up to avoid Devil World Flower's sneak attacks from below. However, under the control of its summoner, Devil World Flower wouldn't necessarily attack according its set rhythm any longer. Considering Luo Ji's IQ, there was no way he'd let GEKG use the set rhythm to his advantage, and Devil World Flower began choosing the worst moments to attack. Blue Exorcist jumped to dodge 5 times and failed 4 times, beaten. Good job. Chen Guo was so excited. If Luo Ji could win, then that was already very impressive, let alone being able to control the situation so fully. With Blue Exorcist surrounded by summons like this, there probably wouldn't be any chances to turn the tables, right? Luo Ji's confidence was steadily growing as well. His tactics were very successful, managing to trap even GEKG, a young and composed player. This was definitely a boost to his morale. Luo Ji had his summons attack relentlessly, relaxing more and more. He slowly regained feeling in his stiff fingers, and Luo Ji suddenly thought, this actually wasn't so hard. Who would have thought that at that exact moment, Blue Exorcist managed to grasp an opening, his scythe twirling around and blue light shining on the ground. Not good. Rising Emblem. Luo Ji was startled. Blue Exorcist's successful attack was naturally because an opening had appeared amongst the 4 beasts around him. Luo Ji hurriedly had Devil World Flower attack, but as he did so, he was stunned by a sudden realization. Blue Exorcist was no longer within Devil World Flower's range. Though it seemed like Blue Exorcist was being crushed by the encirclement of the 4 beasts and Devil World Flower, he had been carefully moving out of Devil World Flower's range. It was just that GEKG had been carefully concealing this movement amongst the 4 beasts' attacks, and Luo Ji, in the end, didn't have enough experience, allowing this movement to go unnoticed until Blue Exorcist had moved out of range and grasped an opportunity to counterattack. Whoosh! Blue light rose from the ground, shooting towards the sky. Luo Ji desperately had his 4 summon beasts dodge out of range, but he was too late for all of them. No matter if it was Spirit Cat and Frost Wolf on the ground, or Young Wyvern and Thunder Eagle in the sky, they were all within range of Rising Emblem. In that moment, they were all thrown upwards. Blue Exorcist ignored them, lunging for concealed light, yet the scythe in his hand was thrown out with spiritual guidance, heading for Devil World Flower. Boom. The scythe also had an explosive talisman stuck to it, and Devil World Flower was instantly enveloped in a ball of flame. Fire element attacks dealt a huge amount of bonus damage to Devil World Flower, too. Just this one attack had Devil World Flower charred and blackened, unable to continue. Blue Exorcist continued to approach concealed light, empty-handed. He brandished his right hand through the air and formed another talisman while his left hand stretched out, catching the scythe returning from spiritual guidance. It's over. Seeing GEKG's smooth attack combo, Luo Ji sighed in acceptance. Concealed light summon creatures had all been left behind. Right now, what else could he do? He wouldn't have the chance to cast and summon again. As for the 4 beasts, their time was coming to an end and they would soon disappear. His opponent had considered all the details, and currently, Luo Ji really had no way of turning this around. Pay attention to the details. When concealed light finally fell, Luo Ji was feeling rather depressed. This had originally been his forte, but this time, it was where he had lost. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1355 Battle of Nightwalkers. Audio source WurshaWorldAudiobook.com 1355 Battle of Nightwalkers. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Updated by BOXNOVEL.com. GEKG's counterattack succeeded, and he won the battle. Void's fans in the audience were jumping and cheering in joy. Walking off stage in this sort of atmosphere only made Luo Ji feel even more upset. The huge digital display kept replaying the moment where Blue Exorcist leapt out of range of the Devil World flowers. and then used a rising emblem to counterattack, successfully killing concealed light. It was Void's home stadium, after all. Of course they would replay their own players' soul-stirring moments for everyone to enjoy. Another wave of applause rose within the stadium. I was so close. Watching these images, Luo Ji's heart felt a wholly different emotion. He actually hadn't noticed at all when Blue Rain jumped out of Devil World Flower's range. Pay attention to the details. Pay attention to all of the details. This was supposed to be his specialty, his greatest strength, but just then he had overlooked such a key point, something so important that it couldn't even be called a detail. Luo Ji truly couldn't forgive himself, especially for such an important match. He had held the advantage, but because of such a big mistake, he ruined his victory. When Luo Ji arrived back at the player area, he couldn't even bear to lift his head. "It's nothing," said Yi Xiu. "It's just a mistake, everyone makes them. When Old Wei was your age, his mistakes were much worse than yours." "Oh, fuck off. When I was his age, glory probably didn't even exist yet, did it?" Wei Chen said to Yi Xiu angrily. "Oh, really? Want to calculate it?" said Yi Xiu. "I don't want to look into this question," Wei Chen said with a wave of his hand. Standing to the side, Luo Ji knew that these two seniors' light-hearted bickering was all to comfort him. He felt moved, but he couldn't just brush this off like it didn't matter. "It won't happen again." Luo Ji solemnly expressed his determination. "No." Quote. But Yi Xiu shook his head. "I'm serious, don't let this weigh you down. No matter how much you pay attention, mistakes can never be avoided completely. In fact, you can easily become too tense and do even worse. Relax. As long as you focus, pursue victory, work your hardest to do the best you can, maintain this kind of conviction, that's enough. Don't worry too much about the little details like mistakes." Again, he was supposed to stop worrying about the little details. Still, Luo Ji understood what Yi Xiu was trying to say. Focus. Maybe this was where his problem lay in this match. In the instant when Blue Exorcist had fallen into the encirclement and been knocked over by Frostwolf, Luo Ji had also fallen into an encirclement, one of happiness. In that situation, it seemed like all of his focus had gone to feeling happy, hence how he had overlooked something so important. "I really haven't seen enough of the world." Luo Ji mocked himself, knowing that this was because his match experience was still lacking. What kind of player would get so happy after just one successful attack? Luo Ji continued to think quietly as he returned to his seat. But as soon as he sat down, a hand came down hard upon his shoulder. "You played pretty well." Steamed Bun praised him loudly, wearing a proud expression, as though it were the result of his own work. Luo Ji had no idea what to say in response to Steamed Bun's words. "That defending radishes playstyle of yours seems really strong." Steamed Bun continued. Defending radishes. What did that even mean? Luo Ji was so agitated that he actually stood back up again, but seeing Steamed Bun's serious face, he quickly felt discouraged. When did Steamed Bun ever make sense? Whatever he said, just accept it. But defending radishes. Luo Ji still felt rather baffled. It was now the third match of the individual competition. Happy sent up Wei Chen, while Void sent their assassin player, Li Zun. Li Zun was originally the most famed user of life-risking strike, but ever since Yang Kong changed his strategy, he gradually became more overlooked. Yang Kong used life-risking strike more frequently, and his success rate left Li Zun in the dust, especially when he used it in the team competition. Even though Yang Kong was gradually stepping down from his position, he remained a main attacker for 301. Even if 301 wanted to use life-risking strike, their strategy would still revolve around him. But Lee Sun and Void didn't have such privilege. Void's core was the Ghost duo, and all strategies revolved around those two players. Lee Sun's life-risking strike was his own decision in individual battles, but in the team battles, unlike Yang Kong, he didn't have a whole team serving his needs. I never knew that life-risking strike could be used to this level. Lee Sun, who especially loved this skill, felt all sorts of longing in his heart when he saw 301's playstyle. But he knew that Void wouldn't give him that kind of environment very often. Only in the individual competition could he run freely. But Lee Sun already didn't pass up any opportunity to use it there. What he really wanted was to use it in the team competition. That feeling of taking out the opponent's core or important character with one attack, trading his tragic death for the team's victory, Lee Sun felt a thrill just thinking about it. It's just too bad. Lee Sun sighed. He could probably only continue to seize his chances in individual battle. The third match of the individual competition began. Since Lee Sun was this kind of assassin, of course he chose a more complicated map. This was another street map. Void was generally good at such maps, which wasn't unrelated to the fact that their core was a phantom demon. This kind of map was good for phantom demons, so Void often chose such maps during team competition. After a long time, they would begin to like such maps for individual battles as well. The characters loaded in and the match began. A warlock on one side and an assassin on the other, both nightwalkers. They both started moving strategically from the very start, ducking into alleys and slowly moving forward. Wei Chen, Windward formation. Before the match, Lee Sun hadn't expected that he would meet this player from Happy, so he hadn't really prepared for this. For such a critical match, Happy was still brave enough to use a player that hadn't really gone on stage much this season. This was a rather unexpected move. Wei Chen had basically been overlooked in Void's preparations for this match. But even if they had paid attention to him, they didn't have much to work off of. There was only so much information to be found about a player who had appeared so infrequently. It wasn't like they could dig up old Blue Rain matches from seasons 1 and 2 a decade ago, could they? The Glory competitive scene was tied to the game itself. Skills and tactics were constantly updating, becoming stronger and more extravagant. 10 years ago, levels were capped at 50, 55, there were fewer skills, and current playstyles had evolved so much since then. And with the level 75 update, with the addition of level 75 equipment and skills, even data from just a few years ago had to be scrutinized with care. Some playstyles had grown extinct because of new equipment or skills. About Wei Chen and Windward formation, there were only two phrases in Lee Sun's mind. Dirty playing. Cast range. Yes, dirty playing. This warlock was truly very dirty. This sort of match attitude couldn't be erased by new strategies or skills. It was like how Fang Rui was still dirty even after changing classes to Chi Master. It was really hard to imagine. WuxaWorldAudio.com. The old Swaxar was actually a dirty playing warlock. Lee Sun tried to compare Wei Chen and the current user of Swaxar, Yu Wenzu, and instantly shuddered. The difference was too great. Lee Sun thought. In general, when teams searched for someone to inherit such an important character, they would try and choose someone with a similar style. That way, the team's overall style wouldn't have to change much, and the transition would be smoother. But Blue Rain, this. Lee Sun honestly had no idea how they'd transitioned. Wasn't there another person between Wei Chen and Yu Wenzu at the time? Was that person both dirty playing and hand crippled? To Lee Sun's, Season 3 was a long time ago, and he wasn't a Blue Rain fan, so he didn't really know much about this extra Swaxar user hidden in Blue Rain's history. Even Wei Chen, if he hadn't jumped back into the spotlight by Joeing Happy, how many young players would know about this old senior from Blue Rain? Against Dirty Playing Guy, he couldn't become overconfident. Especially since this guy had that massive cast range. Lee Sun couldn't let himself die without even managing to touch him. Lee Sun's assassin Ghost Lantern walked along the streets, quickly arriving at his planned destination. And then Ghost Lantern jumped up, displaying the assassin's special passive skill air jump. Jumping with his left and then right foot, he easily hopped atop this small two-story building. The roof was spacious. Although it wasn't very high up, the angle and field of view from this position were really quite good. From here, many regions on this map could be examined. As soon as Ghost Lantern jumped on here, Lee Sun found where Windward Formation was. He's taking the middle road. Lee Sun silently watched for a while, judging what Wei Chen's plans were. Windward Formation was using the most standard method of strategic movement. Heading toward the map's center in a roundabout way, finding the target so a sneak attack could be launched from the side or back. But too bad, I'm over here. Lee Sun's Ghost Lantern crouched on the rooftop, and he continued to silently study Windward Formation as the character appeared and disappeared. Finally, Lee Sun made his judgment and Ghost Lantern gently jumped from the roof, directly landing upon another two-story rooftop across the street, and then directly headed toward where Windward Formation was. How come I don't see anyone? The little guy's hiding. Quote, at this time, a message from Wei Chen arrived in the chat. Dirty playing, as expected. Dirty playing guys always liked saying a few words in the chat to rile up the opponent. Speaking of this style, Blue Rain had really succeeded in carrying it on. But Huang Shaoshan's method was entirely different from the dirty playing style of riling up. His method was just straight up bombing the opponent to exhaustion. What in the world had happened in Blue Rain? How had the seniors' talents been passed on like this? No more dirty plays, but the trash talking became so frenzied. As Lee Sun controlled Ghost Lantern forward, he actually grew quite curious about Blue Rain's past. He even made the decision, next time he met Blue Rain, he had to ask about their story. As for whatever Wei Chen said after that, apologies, but he didn't look. It was just trash talk. Who wanted to see it? Lee Sun chose to ignore it, and his gaze didn't even wander toward the chat window. Ghost Lantern continued to move, and finally, Windward Formation's sneaky-looking posture clearly appeared in front of him. Ghost Lantern rolled onto the ground. From now on, his movements need to be even more careful. How should he go about this? If he directly went up and used a life-risking strike, could that take care of him? As soon as he thought of this possibility, Lee Sun instantly became fired up. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1356. A Casual Poke. Audio source, WuxaWorldAudiobook.com. 1356. A Casual Poke. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Updated by BOXNOVEL.com. Closing in, step by step. Right now, the entire stadium's feelings were bound to Ghost Lantern's movement. On screen, everyone saw from Lee Sun's point of view. Windward Formation's outline became larger and clearer. Closer and closer. Life-risking strike. Almost everyone had this thought, since they were familiar with Lee Sun's style. This was a player who would always pursue a kill with life-risking strike. But could he do it this time? This really need to be considered. Just judging from their life totals, Ghost Lantern was capable of assassinating Windward Formation with a life-risking strike. However, would Windward Formation's equipment affect the outcome? Armor values weren't useful. Life-risking strike traded hit point for hit point. It removed health directly and ignored armor. However, what if Windward Formation's armor had damage absorption effects? Damage absorption would be able to reduce incoming health removal from life-risking strike. If the absorption percentage was high enough, then this skill wouldn't be able to directly kill Windward Formation. Unfortunately, Void had no such information on the silver equipment on Windward Formation, since their team lacked information and research on both Wei Chen and Windward Formation. Li Zun could only rely on his own judgment. When directly comparing health values, Ghost Lantern was 12% higher than Windward Formation. The assassin's HP stat growth was below average. Ghost Lantern's equipment had some additional HP boosts. It was necessary for someone who loved life-risking strike, where the damage output scaled with HP. The difference was that the HP was not stacked as high as possible like normal players would do, with disregard to anything else. Void did not want him to just focus on life-risking strike and need him to contribute in other ways too. Right now, his health points were 12% higher than Windward Formation's. This meant that if Windward Formation's equipment carried more than 12% damage absorption, he could survive Ghost Lantern's life-risking strike. If not, then life-risking strike would be a one-hit kill. Maybe attack a few times and do a calculation first. It's possible an opportunity like this would not arise again. The opponent had a dirty playstyle, and all pro players knew how hard it was to successfully ambush a dirty player. Li Zun really just didn't want to give up this huge opportunity that presented itself before him. Take a shot at it? Li Zun pondered. 12% damage absorption was not high. However, Warlocks wore cloth armor and had subpar defensive attributes. This meant not just basic defense values, but also other defensive attributes, such as armor values and damage absorption values. Cloth armors were the worst in this aspect, amongst all other armor types. A lowly 12%. However, for it to appear on cloth armor, quite a chunk of other useful attributes might have been traded off for it. Would a Warlock sacrifice these useful attributes for some extra survivability? This was really hard to say. After all, survivability was useful for any class and couldn't be considered a waste. So did Windward Formation have it? Ghost Lantern's movement grinded to a halt. Li Zun could not reach a conclusion and did not advance any further. If he kept going, he would have to act. Equipment chosen by someone who loved playing dirty. Would he prioritize attributes like damage absorption? Li Zun was trying to answer the question from perspective of the opponent's playstyle. However, before he could reach any conclusion, Li Zun suddenly remembered something else. Cast range. Windward Formation's biggest distinctive feature was his absurdly long cast range. A long cast range meant a big attack area, which also meant a larger protective zone. A Warlock that had an advantage in that aspect, would he need more protective measures? Would he? He shouldn't need it. Li Zun's mind was made. It wasn't from the opponent's playstyle, but rather from his character's specialty. Then, let's go. Ghost Lantern once again began his advance. He leapt down from a rooftop and landed in a half-crouch soundlessly, then patiently stalked forward. Patient bastard, I'm behind you. Li Zun couldn't resist complain to himself after seeing that Wei Chen seemed to be patiently and cluelessly waiting for his target to appear. Ghost Lantern approached, step by step. Finally, he ran out of cover and could only approach directly from behind. There were only a few steps left, but the closer he got, the more nervous Li Zun got. If the opponent suddenly turned around now, then it would all have been for naught. approach with a shin cut or continue slowly moving. The two options crossed Li Zun's mind, and he made his decision in a split second. At this time, Li Zun decided it was better to be fast about it. He didn't want to risk all his work being wasted after coming this far. Shin cut. Immediately, a cold light flashed out, along with the fluttering of cloth in the wind. Ghost Lantern had already abruptly flashed behind Windward Formation. Life-risking strike. Life-risking strike as expected. Li Zun boldly used this skill to directly decide the match. Windward Formation hastily turned around after hearing the sound behind him, but Ghost Lantern's dagger had already arrived. Fueled by his own life, a one-hit kill assassination skill from Ghost Lantern. Fierce, powerful. Windward Formation's reaction was meaningless. Turning around only presented his chest to be stabbed by Ghost Lantern's dagger. Schluck. A hair-raising sound was produced as the dagger buried itself deep into Windward Formation's chest. However, an ominous feeling arose in Li Zun's mind. Something's off. Something's really off. Something had to be off. The attack hit, and Windward Formation's health bar slid down quickly. However, Li Zun felt something went terribly wrong. His intuition told him that he shouldn't stay here and pose. He need to turn tail and run. But Windward Formation's arm was already raised. Death's hand casually poked at a random spot on Ghost Lantern's body. He fell. Ghost Lantern fell. Life-risking strike left the user with 1 hit point. That meant that even a normal melee attack from a Warlock staff was enough to kill him. For Windward Formation to be able to carry out that attack, however, it only meant one thing: life-risking strike did not one-shot him. Miscalculation. Li Zun only had regret in his mind, but it was all too late. Ghost Lantern's 1 hit point was not enough to handle anything, and a poke from his opponent's staff dispatched him. How ludicrous. No skills were used, and a regular poke ended the match. He really handed himself to his opponent. Yes, he did. Handed himself on a silver platter. Everything suddenly became clear to Li Zun. The opponent planned his whole strategy around his playstyle and gave him an opportunity to use life-risking strike. Li Zun knew something was wrong, but now he knew exactly what. It was his opponent's reaction. This was the Pro League. They were all pro players with unmatched experience. Even for someone who had not played for a long time, being part of the Pro League meant his glory experience was richer than a regular player. Just then, when Ghost Lantern charged forth with Shin Cut, what was the opponent's reaction when he heard it? He turned around. He actually turned around. This was way too much of a rookie's reaction. Any glory player who had some PK experience would know to dodge instead of turn around if they felt something was off behind themselves. Roll, jump, strafe, rush forward, or use a skill. Anything was fine, but there was no reason to turn around. WooshOurWorldAudio.com. What would that do? If they saw your poor face, would they suddenly feel a rush of sympathy and stop their attack? As it turned out, Windward Formation's reaction was to turn around. Even though he barely made an appearance this season, wasn't it laughable for this antique of a player with more than 10 years experience in glory to turn around in this situation? Not realizing immediately was absolutely moronic. Turning around at that time meant Wei Chen was prepared way ahead of time. Wei Chen already had a plan in mind, so when the attack came, he did not dodge or retreat but turned around. When life-risking strike hit, he just casually poked away. I got fucking poked to death. Li Zun clutched his head and wished he could stuff his whole head into his monitor. I got played, completely played. If he realized a split second earlier, there was still time to cancel the attack. But he didn't. He completely missed it. At the time, he was already immersed in the elation of winning the match with one strike. Turns out, the match really did end, not with his one strike, but the opponent's one poke. A warlock raised his staff and poked. Thinking of this, Lee Zun once again felt the urge to stuff his head into his monitor. Thus, the third match of the individual competition was concluded. It hadn't sunk in for the whole stadium yet. It hadn't even sunk in for the referee. Wei Chen appeared from his player booth, grinning ear to ear, and waved at everyone watching. This isn't Happy's home stadium. The audience didn't even have time to feel bad about him winning. Who the hell would appreciate him showing off? Wei Chen was purely trying to stir shit up. He waved his hands, the stadium filled with boos. He then left the stage happily amongst the booing. Boo away to your heart's content. Wei Chen looked at this stadium full of people. So what if there were boos? Summoning boos was a special ability for playing an away game. I came, I won. Booing was the proof of that. Wei Chen returned to Happy's bench. He glanced at Lee Zun on Void's side, who looked distracted and lost after leaving the stage, and laughed scornfully. He raised his right pinky finger and said, "I can take care of this kind of small fry with my pinky. I hope you can give me more of a challenge next time." Everyone laughed, and this time, even Yishu didn't go burst his bubble. Taken care of with a pinky. This really was a joke. Wei Chen put a lot of effort into preparing for the match against Void. Lee Zun was someone who would definitely play in the individual competition, since his playstyle was not suitable for the group arena. So for Wei Chen, there was a solid 1 in 3 chance that Lee Zun was his opponent, and thus researched him a lot. Fortunately, he did run into Lee Zun in the individual competition, and everything indeed went according to his plan. This was the reason why he could topple Lee Zun with just his pinky. Small tricks. This was a specially targeted trick, and most likely wouldn't work again. The problem was, an old player like Wei Chen had more than 10 years of experience, and who knew how many more tricks he had up his sleeve. You would be underestimating him if you expected him to repeat the same trick twice. End chapter.